I could deal with the ickiness, really, of talking about fame, because you know, famous people very rarely admit to being famous, and then, as I say in the show, the thing they really don't admit to is being less famous than they used to be. Therefore, there's a gap in the market.
And so they go out of their way to make themselves as, or supposedly as free as possible.
I don't feel that was ever massively changed by, you know, becoming famous, and so I feel the address of the show is not really, here I am, a famous person from the world of fame. It's more like, imagine yourself, a normal person, suddenly in this world. This is what it's like. It's very weird.
You talked about using the PowerPoint presentation, and other comics have done it. And I wondered whether, because you have shared the stage in the past with Rob Newman and Frank Skinner, you've always had a foil, a partner, somebody to play off. So your PowerPoint becomes the surrogate Rob or Frank.
I guess that's true. The other reason why I need the PowerPoint is I say very early on in the show that everything I talk about is true, which it is, and I think the PowerPoint helps that, because you can see audiences, for reason, will laugh more when they really believe that the story is true. So I guess that's partly what the PowerPoint is there for as well.
And that leads
evidence. It's there as
it's
evidence. Yeah. At one point I include a picture of me and Robbie at Wembley Arena. I think I say it's just there for the sake of poignancy. I'm telling a story. There'll be some very young people, you know, sort of 20 or under, in my audience who will not know about History Today and Rob Newman and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's also partly there to provide information for people who don't know about
History Today.
Exactly, the history of History Today.
But you do bring these stories in, real stories, and back it up with visual evidence that you were there at Russell Brand. Have you asked Russell Brand whether this is okay to talk about?
I told Russell that I was going to do a bit about his wedding, and then I didn't tell him exactly what it was, because I'd rather he saw it in situ, and then, as I've often done, if they're there, I then break off and say, are you all right with that, in the middle of the show.
Is that what you did when he was
I did when Russell was there, yeah. No, he was. Well, he said no as a joke, and then we talked for a while. Actually, because I used to have in the show a whole bit about how I am the third man in the Saxgate scandal. Russell asked me, when he was still living in London, if I had any film ideas one day. And I said, okay, I'll come round and have a chat tomorrow morning. Will there be any women there? And I said that specifically because that was a time when there could be 7 or 8 women in Russell's house at any one point in time, and I felt the women there would not be conducive to my sense of sexual temperament and indeed work.
Is that a comic exaggeration, by the way?
No, that's absolutely true. That is completely, at any one time there could be 7 or 8 women. You open the door, it's just wearing a pair of pants, and I said, they haven't got, have they? And he said, no. And so I said, okay, let's go and work anyway. Now, these women were the satanic sluts. That may ring a bell. So we go up to Russell's study. We were trying to work, but they keep on coming up, these 2 women who he's just left in his bedroom, not told to go home, I think for very specific reasons. And they're coming up and they're talking to us, and then eventually one of them says, my grandfather is Andrew Sachs. And I said, oh, I know him, which I do vaguely. And she said, oh, for heaven's sake, don't tell him I was here. And I said, don't worry, I'm not going to phone up Manuel and say, guess where I met your granddaughter, right? 6 weeks later, on the Russell Brand Radio 2 show, it went very well. Then Manuel and Andrew Sachs became a running gag, and they decided to keep that running gag going and phone him the next week when Jonathan Ross was the guest. I did do that in my show, and in the end I decided that's too much Russell Brand, actually.
The show is enabled because of your close proximity to a lot of people. I mean, there's just a very casual quick joke about being backstage at Live 8 with Ricky Gervais and meeting Madonna. There's a hilarious line to it, but in fact it's her gag that you take. You're harvesting gags, aren't you?
Well, I would say only in that particular situation am I actually using someone else's joke, which I absolutely give them credit for, to get laughs, and I have to tell it in a way to get on to the thing that happens later on. Yes, it was an extraordinary moment. I was walking around with Ricky Gervais backstage at Live 8, and Madonna suddenly appears, and obviously she starts saying to him, I love your show, it's great, I would sweep up on set if you asked me, I'd love to work with you, I'm your biggest fan. And Ricky said, brilliantly, and you are? And Madonna, brilliantly, said Paris Hilton, which really, really, really raised her in my estimation. I thought, that is a funny woman.
Being back on stage and road testing the show that you're taking to Edinburgh, has it reminded you that you've missed it? Or in fact, did you miss it when you were away from the stage?
That's a very good question, and I still haven't quite worked that out for myself. I remember walking once to a gig with Frank Skinner in Edinburgh and saying, you're on in 2 minutes. He went, yeah, and just shrugged his shoulders and went on. I'm not like that. I get full of dread, full of anxiety and pains, and it ruins my day. So there's a conflict that went on, and actually probably is one of the main, I don't talk about this in the show, but one of the main reasons I gave up stand-up is that I thought, it's killing me.
Was it stage fright?
It's not. It is stage fright, but it vanishes as soon as I step on stage.
And was that heightened when you were doing the warm-up shows because you hadn't done it for such a long time as well?
Yeah, but it gets better. But one of the tricks to being a stand-up is doing it a lot and becoming inured to the dread. The first time I did it back at Soho Theatre, when, by the way, the show was a complete mess, I just thought, why am I doing this?
Do you have to get yourself into a sort of state of match fitness as well?
I think so. Particularly because this show has got some serious moments in it and some sort of emotional moments in it. And I thought, well, I don't know how to remember that stuff, because the way I always used to remember stand-up is I'm heading for the joke. I know where the joke word is, but you can't do that with sort of serious moments. It's more abstract.
And in the words of Take That, are you back for good?
If it's Take That asking, the answer has to be yes, Gary.
David Baddiel, his show Fame is at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe this summer. More details can be found on the Front Row website. Dame Laura Knight forged an early 20th century career as a portrait painter at a time when the British arts establishment was still a stuffy gentleman's club. In 1936 she became the first ever woman to be allowed to join the Royal Academy in nearly a century and a half. 10 years later she was commissioned to record the proceedings at the Nuremberg war crimes trial. The result is a canvas which depicts rows of Nazis, including Goering and Hess, sitting in court but surrounded by the ruins of war. It's one of many paintings on show at a new exhibition of the work of Dame Laura Knight at the National Portrait Gallery. With me is the critic Juliet Gardner. Juliet, let me start with this painting, the Nuremberg trial. I'd never seen it before. A prestigious commission, I presume, at the time, but actually quite a controversial result.
Yes, she actually asked she wanted to go to Nuremberg. It was her idea. And it's very interesting because most of her paintings of Nuremberg are very detailed. They're sketches of the defendants and the prosecutors. And she insisted that she sat in the American box. Everybody else had to do their painting, their sketches through opera glasses. But she insisted she was going to get right up close. And they're very realist. She was a traditionalist realist painter.
She's looking down on the top of their heads.
Down on
from
the
the
top
press
of their,
gallery.
absolutely. But they're very detailed, and she did a lot of individual sketches, and then you get this final one. You've still got the defendants and the prosecutors, but the mirage, there's a mirage, the back wall of the court sort of dissolves, and there is Dresden, ruined Dresden, with people, living bodies, people living in holes in the ground, scavenging the firewood, all that sort of thing. Obviously it's talking about the destruction of Dresden, but of course it was the British that destroyed Dresden.
Which must have made it a very controversial painting when it arrived back in Britain.
Very coolly received.
Was it?
First, yes. It was shown in the Royal Academy Summer Exhibition that year and was certainly very coolly received. But on the other hand, it could be a comment on war.
Right, but she'd forged a reputation, I guess, in the wartime years when she was, and I'm not sure if this is a commission, and this is a far more well-known image. It's called Ruby Loftus Screwing a Breech Ring. And it's of a woman working in a factory and making a bomb part. And this became quite an iconic image in the war effort.
It did, because she was commissioned by the War Artists Advisory Committee, which was under Sir Kenneth Clarke, who was a very young director of the National Gallery at the time. And the point was that they wanted not only to have military paintings, but they wanted to show the contribution that the Home Front made. And there was Ruby Loftus, who was actually worked in a tobacconist shop in peacetime. There she was doing a skilled engineering job, and it became iconic. And factories asked for, copies of it, prints of it, so that they could sort of inspire their own workers. So this is what women are doing for the war.
And it's got a photorealist quality to it. The only thing that worries me is it's a bit inert, a bit lifeless, considering that there she is in a factory, and you'd expect the sense of noise and confusion going on.
I wonder if Laura Knight wanted to make quite sure that she got it entirely accurate. You know what I mean? And therefore lost some of the vitality. I mean, she's our Rosie the Riveter, isn't she, really? I think that's why
Is she? I mean, she's been overlooked really to an extent. Is she a great painter, do you think?
I don't think she was. I think she was out of her time. I mean, she is a realist painter at a time when modernism was sort of coming in. I mean, everything she did was fairly traditional. Some of her early paintings are deeply Victorian. I mean, they could have been painted, in the 1890s. Not
Twin Sets and Pearls.
And fishermen in sou'westers and, people pushing out boats and things like that. And when she did circus paintings, and for example, Picasso did circus paintings, hers are completely straight. His were anything but. And in many ways, everything she did in sort of realist terms. Even when she painted Nijinsky in the Ballet of Boots, which would have been a perfect example for a bit of surrealism. But of course, I suppose Nuremberg was surrealist. That was the only thing, it's the only time we get away from her as a traditionalist, figurative painter.
Thanks very much to Juliet Gardner. The exhibition Laura Knight Portraits is on at the National Portrait Gallery in London until the 13th of October. Make sure you check out the self-portrait at the beginning of that exhibition. Best one there, I think. Finally tonight, Cultural Exchange.
Such a